The eyes are on the Jersey Shore, and today they are at Monmouth University, where I am speaking with Dr. Hettie Williams, Assistant Professor at Monmouth University of African American Studies, here during Black History Month, during the month of February, taking a look at some Jersey Shore history in Monmouth and Ocean counties, as well as New Jersey history, and focusing on the month. The leaders who came before us, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and the late Hank Henry Aaron, among others. I am Vin Ebenau today. Dr. Williams, thank you for joining me today for this discussion on the past, the present, and what we could do to honor those who came before us and try to, certainly bring out that peace and education in the future as well.
Thank you for having me.
So in terms of Jersey Shore history of Black History Month, is there anybody who was born or lived in Monmouth or Ocean counties, or any significant events that you have found through your research and in your teachings and everything at Monmouth University that maybe perhaps a lot of people around the Jersey Shore don't know about?
I think one story that everyone should know about, but they likely do not, is the story of Dr. Walter McAfee. McAfee was a scientist and a mathematician who worked out of Camp Evans, local to the Jersey Shore. Of course, many people know or familiar with Info Age that has recently done an exhibit on McAfee. McAfee was one of the hidden figures of science, and he worked in the important Diana project. It was basically the precursor to the space age that many of us really think about in the 1950s. He was not born in New Jersey, but he actually worked in New Jersey as a scientist among a group of scientists that were known as the Black Brain Trust. And this is a great story that many people do not know much about. McAfee went on to teach also at Monmouth University. He was one of the few African Americans who was able to secure a degree. He had a doctoral degree from Cornell that he earned in 1949. What is significant about McAfee and the Black scientists who work with him is they actually start the space program. We tend to think of the 1950s and the 1960s race to the moon. And it actually began right here on the Jersey Shore with Black scientists like McAfee, who are known for something called the moon bounce. And it was developing the feasibility of bouncing signals off the moon. And it actually started the space program. So McAfee is unknown, I think, the fact that he worked right on the Jersey Shore.
And it had such significance, certainly not just around here, but on the country and the world, just with the moon. I mean, that's something that certainly affects everybody. But I think to your point, just somebody who maybe a lot of people don't know about, it's just somebody who was so instrumental in that science field, and things that we certainly know about, but not know who started the ball rolling in that process and looking up that research. Was there anybody else or any other events that stood out to you that of things that happened historically, or things that have developed over the past few decades, and even more recent history as well, in terms of things that happened across the Jersey Shore that either people don't know about or don't know much about, or things that we should be reminded of things that happened at the shore or were developed by people at the shore, or somebody who had some sort of tie-in to the shore, in terms of the things that we know about today, the things that we live and that we learn about?
I think one big story, we all know the Asbury Park area. So many people come to the Jersey Shore to visit Asbury Park and Long Branch area. And my own research is about the civil rights movement in New Jersey. And I make the argument that the civil rights movement has its roots in New Jersey, including on the Jersey Shore. Asbury Park was known to have one of the more active chapters of the NAACP, now known as the Asbury Park Neptune chapter of the NAACP. So connecting it back to these scientists, one of the scientists who worked at Camp Evans was actually had a cross burning on his yard in the mid 1940s, and he got on the phone and he called the Asbury Park, the NAACP. This was about 1947, and they came, actually they got together. It was about 27 members of the Asbury Park NAACP who actually got in their cars, and they were armed when they came to this scientist's home to protect him. It is written up in the New York Times, and it also appeared a story in the Asbury Park Press about what happened. Now, this ties into the larger civil rights movement because there's a big debate among historians how the civil rights movement was fought with nonviolent direct action. That was a part of how it was fought. But members of the NAACP also carried arms. The most famous, of course, is from North Carolina, uh, and Robert F. Williams, who's well known to have been a member of the NAACP and said, well, we should defend ourselves by taking up arms. Well, actually, this activity was happening right here on the Jersey Shore in Asbury Park.
How, and one of the things, certainly with your area of studies with the civil rights movement, more not necessarily Shore or New Jersey related here, but what are some of the main focuses that you teach to your students at Monmouth University, or things American history wise, New Jersey history wise, that either tie in together, or the things that are really the focus of different courses, the things that we need to know the most about, as not just as we go through Black History Month, but throughout the year as well?
So I think two major events, which I would imagine many people living on the Jersey Shore know: the music history of New Jersey. And there was a moment called the Harlem Renaissance that happened during the Jazz Age, and many of the jazz artists of the Harlem Renaissance era and beyond uh, were living in New Jersey, and of course on the Jersey Shore. Count Basie being one of them that is well known. Arguments are now being made about the music culture in New Jersey and how New Jersey artists have made a contribution from the early 20s, the era of the Harlem Renaissance, down to the present. I mean, many people know Dana Owens actually was from Newark, Queen Latifah, but she's also lived in Monmouth County and Colts Neck, and once kept a home here. So we have, I think, a long history of music culture and making contributions to American music culture, but also, again, civil rights is, I think, probably one of the important stories that everyone should know. And because the civil rights movement is referred to as the struggle for Black equality, and it's a struggle that continues down to the present with the Black Lives Matter movement, folks should realize that that is a larger continuum of history. It's not something new. There's always been struggles for Black equality, and that's just the most recent iteration of it.
How have you seen that those challenges and that struggle for Black equality, either living it and seeing it certainly, but in your studies and in your research over the past few decades and couple hundred years of American history, and as how have things developed? How have things gotten worse? How have things gotten to where they started to where they are right now, and what we're looking at in our society today? The shore, the state, certainly the whole country as a whole is in the civil rights movement and the search for equality.
So I think obviously there has been progress, since the struggle for Black equality began, and but at the same time there has been setbacks in this history, and one of the areas of progress I would say has been in, for instance, the acceptance of African American culture, including music culture. That there's been a greater, if you could argue, there's been a greater level of integration when it comes to Black culture as opposed to social and economic integration. So when we think about integration of African Americans into American society as a whole, we want to think about these different sectors of society: culture, economics, social integration, and those various sectors in society. I would make the argument that New Jersey has been progressive in many ways, but also a mirror to the nation in terms of setbacks. Your listeners probably would agree. There's always the big fight about whether there's a Central Jersey versus North Jersey and South Jersey. I would actually argue, and maybe others might say there's really three states here, but ultimately, very in the history of New Jersey, there are two states. The northern part of the state tends to resemble the New York and the northern part of the country, whereas South Jersey tends to resemble the southern part of the country. Because in its colonial history, it was really two entities until it merged into one. So we have kind of these two histories contained in the borders of the state. And that's why I feel that historians should look more at the history of New Jersey to get a better understanding of how far the country has progressed. We have been progressive on areas such as civil unions, right? The story of Laurel Hester, which eventually became a movie, that happened in New Jersey. The first significant case of school integration involved students in Trenton, New Jersey. And it was a precedent to the Brown decision. It happened in 1944 and involving a middle school in Trenton that was segregating Black and white students. So we have this history of progress in leading the nation, I think, on many levels.
Certainly, and to your point about the breakup of New Jersey, I mean, the debate, I guess, about whether Central Jersey exists or not is almost like the debate over whether it's pork roll or Taylor ham. And that debate just goes on. But to hit on your point about sort of that divide between North Jersey, South Jersey, and everything, what can New Jersey do as a whole, whether it's people living in the southern part of the state, the central part of the state, and the northern part of the state, to either work together, sort of come together and try to figure out ways to bring equality to everybody and make sure that everybody has the same kind of opportunities and that we're all on the same page in terms of education and knowing what's going on in our own state?
I would say many people forget that our public libraries are a great source of local history. And for instance, our local libraries often keep primary source records that historians need to be able to tell the story of the past. And many of our public libraries often have monthly programming. I know just about each public library that I've done a talk for, they have monthly programming and it's usually themed. Many of the libraries are doing talks that are free at your free public library on African American history. So I would say learn, educate yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be sitting necessarily in a college classroom. It could be that you sign up for one of these free programs at our local libraries to learn more about the past. Educate yourself. I think it's through the study of history that we become better citizens.
How can that history and just becoming more educated on the past and about what's going on in the now help with equality in terms of jobs? I know certainly in the sports world, for example, one of the things that's getting debated is the amount of Black candidates for head coaching jobs in the NFL. There were 7 openings this past cycle since the season ended, and only one Black coach was hired out with the Houston Texans. But sports-wise, education, medically, teachers, whatever profession, how it just seems something that simply that the best candidates should be getting the job. Why in 2021 are we still having that conversation about Black men and Black women not having the same amount of opportunities as white men and white women?
I think that the history of our country is obviously bound up with the history of race and racism. And at the core of it, we must accept the humanity of all people. And I think that's what's at the root of discrimination. We have a fixed idea about an individual based on the color of their skin. And we have to rid ourselves of those beliefs and accept that there's only one human race, Homo sapiens, right? Race, the color of someone's skin is not enough it's not seen as enough biological, right, information to designate someone of a different race. That is an idea that we created, races, right? But we know that there is only a human race, and we need to understand that, and it always has to become a mantra, that we are all members of the human race, and that each person should have access and opportunity, because this is a story about access and opportunity and chances.
Mhm. Looking at some of the people who have come before us, who have gone through either challenges and certainly brought about positive change over the past, few decades and couple hundred years and everything. Certainly, it's some things that we learn about as early as elementary school. People like Frederick Douglass and Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and in this, with another sports reference, the late Hank Henry Aaron, who certainly received death threats as he was chasing down Babe Ruth's home run record. How do we take what they did and use that as something that we could continue to share their message of peace and equality and education, and make our society certainly a better place, and to sort of continue their vision and continue their mission, and form that equality, and certainly continue their message, and make sure that what the things that they said and the things that they did, live on forever?
I think it has to start early. The education that receive, we have to really start early in the public school system in teaching the stories of many African Americans. Not somebody like Walter McAfee, right? We need to teach those stories early, and it's an example of what it means to be human, despite everything that this man faced: segregation, being turned away from scholarships, but nonetheless having the knowledge to do the things that he accomplished. His story stands in for the human story, and so we must tell more human stories that incorporate, um, you know, information about people from diverse backgrounds. And I think when we do more of that, it does certainly help us to accept the humanity of all people.
Dr. Williams, as we close up here, what are some things, certainly through your research, through your expertise here, as to not only how we can educate ourselves, but educate others in a peaceful manner, and not a violent manner, and try to live out peacefully and live out equally with each and every day, and with whatever we do and who we do it with, whether they're family, friends, or somebody who's a complete stranger that we happen to meet in a cafe or a diner or the local store?
No, it's a simple lesson, I think. I also think the study of history also not only teaches us about our past, but it makes us more ethical. When we look at the past as example, and we look at what the people who came before us went through, I think that we can take those lessons to become more ethical human beings. And so I think the study of history, the study of the past, is certainly a tool to not only make us better citizens, but better human beings. And I think joining organizations, volunteering, maybe in a community maybe in your own community or a different community with people who may not look like you, because then you'll have that human experience and that contact. I think sometimes we live such isolated lives from one another, and racism is rooted in fear of the unknown. So reach out to diverse communities is also one way to, I think, heal the divide between ethnic groups.
Dr. Williams, thanks for taking out some time to not only talk about the Jersey Shore's impact, Ocean and Monmouth counties, on Black history, but New Jersey as well. Certainly a lot of significance there, and the country as well, to use what we've seen and what we've heard, and educate ourselves, educate others, and try to make this an equal society with equal opportunities for everybody, and a peaceful society as well, as we go through Black History Month, and to take those lessons that we hear about and that we learn in the month of February through the other 11 months of the year as well.
Thank you for having me and allowing me this opportunity to speak with you.
That is Dr. Hettie Williams, Assistant Professor of African American Studies at Monmouth University. If you're going to Monmouth, sign up for Dr. Williams' classes. Dr. Williams, thanks again for your time, and please continue to do the work that you do.
You're welcome. Thanks.
For Dr. Hettie Williams, I am Vin Ebenau for another episode of Eyes on the Jersey Shore. Make sure you download our app and make sure you share this video and share this story as well with the people in your community so that we can find that equality, keep it, and educate others and find that peace and share that with others as well. I'll talk to you all next time.